I was 63 years old when my own son told me I didn't deserve comfort anymore. Let me say that again, because even now, 3 years later, the words still catch in my throat like glass. My own child, the boy I raised, the man I sacrificed everything for, looked me in the eye and told me I was taking up too much space in my own home. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who are supposed to love you, you already know the particular kind of death that happens while you're still breathing. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching this from, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. And please, check the description box for more stories like this one, stories about women who refuse to disappear. It didn't start with the bedroom, of course. It never does. It started 2 years earlier, when my son Jeremy called me from Seattle. His marriage was falling apart, he said. He and his wife Amanda needed a fresh start, somewhere cheaper, somewhere they could regroup. Could they stay with me for a few months? Just until they got back on their feet. I lived alone in a 4-bedroom house in Portland that my late husband Robert and I had bought in 1987. Robert died of a heart attack in 2018, and the house had felt enormous and empty ever since. The idea of having Jeremy home again, of hearing life in those silent rooms, of cooking for someone other than myself, it felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. So I said yes. Of course I said yes. They arrived on a rainy October afternoon with a U-Haul and boxes marked temporary storage. Amanda had been crying, I could tell, even though she'd reapplied her makeup. Jeremy looked thinner, harder somehow, like life had filed down his softer edges. I hugged them both and felt Amanda stiffen slightly in my arms, but I told myself she was just stressed. The first month was almost nice. We'd have dinner together a few times a week. Amanda would occasionally help with dishes. Jeremy fixed the loose board on the back porch that had been bothering me for months. I started to remember what it felt like to be needed, to be useful, to matter in someone's daily life. But then the second month came, and small things began to shift. Amanda started leaving her things in my spaces. Her yoga mat in the living room corner where I used to read. Her expensive lotions crowding my bathroom counter. Her meal prep containers dominating the refrigerator. When I gently mentioned it, she smiled tightly and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Helen. I'm just so scattered right now. You understand." I did understand. I always understood. Jeremy stopped fixing things and started pointing out everything that was wrong with the house instead. The water heater was inefficient. The windows were drafty. The kitchen needed updating. He'd walk through rooms shaking his head like a disappointed inspector, and I'd feel shame creep up my neck for living in a home that suddenly wasn't good enough. They stopped contributing to groceries but started eating everything I bought. Amanda began working from home, taking over the dining room table with her laptop and papers, sighing heavily whenever I needed to pass through. The guest room where they slept became a disaster zone of unpacked boxes and discarded clothes, and when I offered to help organize it, Amanda said, "We're fine, Helen. We don't need you to mother us." The word mother came out like an insult. By month 4, they'd stopped talking about leaving. The apartment search they'd mentioned never materialized. Job interviews Jeremy supposedly had never seemed to go anywhere. When I asked about their plans, Jeremy would get defensive. "We're working on it, Mom. God, can you just give us some breathing room? It's not like you need this whole house to yourself anyway." That's when I started to feel it, that specific anxiety that lives in your stomach like a stone. The feeling that you're a guest in your own life, apologizing for taking up space, for existing too loudly, for needing things that inconvenience others. If you know that feeling, if you've ever had someone make you feel small in the place where you're supposed to feel safest, then you understand why I didn't fight back. Not yet. Not when it was just small encroachments, just minor annoyances. You tell yourself you're being petty. You tell yourself family is supposed to sacrifice for each other. You tell yourself that love means making yourself smaller so others have room to grow. You tell yourself these lies until you almost believe them. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in February. I was in my master bedroom, the room I'd shared with Robert for 30 years, the room where I'd nursed him through his final illness, the room that still smelled faintly of his cologne when I opened the closet. I was folding laundry on my bed when Jeremy and Amanda appeared in the doorway. "Mom, we need to talk," Jeremy said, and something in his tone made my hands stop moving. They came in and sat on the edge of my bed like they owned it. Amanda's eyes were scanning the room, the large windows, the attached bathroom, the walk-in closet, with an appraiser's calculation. "This is ridiculous," Amanda started, not even looking at me. "We're cramped in that tiny guest room with one closet and a bathroom we have to share with you. You're here alone in this massive master suite with more space than one person could ever need." My mouth opened but no sound came out. Jeremy leaned forward, his voice taking on that reasonable, patient tone people use when they're about to say something unreasonable. "You're getting older, Mom. You don't need all this space. The stairs to the master bedroom are hard on your knees anyway, you've said so yourself. It would actually be better for you to be on the ground floor." "The ground floor?" I finally managed to say. "The basement," Amanda clarified, as if it were obvious. "It's heated mostly, and there's that old couch down there. You could set up a little area. It would be perfect." Perfect. That word echoed in my head as I stared at them, these two people sitting on my bed in my room in my house, telling me that a dank basement was perfect for a woman who'd given everything. I want you to understand something. The basement wasn't mostly heated. It was cold enough that I stored root vegetables down there because they stayed fresh longer. There was a small space heater that barely worked, concrete floors, one tiny window near the ceiling, and a smell of mildew that no amount of bleach ever quite eliminated. The couch they mentioned was a 30-year-old fold-out that Robert and I had relegated to storage when the springs started poking through. This was what they thought I deserved. "Just temporarily," Jeremy added quickly, seeing my face. "Just until we figure things out. A few months, tops. You'd still have full access to the kitchen and everything. You'd barely notice the difference. But I would notice. I would notice waking up in the dark, in the cold, in a space that felt like punishment. I would notice climbing stairs to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. I would notice them in my sanctuary, sleeping in the bed where my husband died, looking through the windows where I'd watched seasons change for decades. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them out. I wanted to become the kind of woman who slams doors and makes ultimatums and doesn't care if she's called difficult or unreasonable or ungrateful for her own kindness. But I was 63 and tired and so deeply programmed to accommodate others that I heard myself say, "Let me think about it." "Think fast," Amanda said, standing up. "We really need to make this change soon. For everyone's comfort." Everyone's comfort. As if my discomfort didn't count as part of everyone. That night, I barely slept. I lay in my bed in my room in my house, and felt rage and helplessness war inside my chest. Part of me kept trying to rationalize. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe this was what good mothers did. Maybe I was being selfish for wanting comfort in my old age. But another part of me, a smaller, quieter voice that I'd been ignoring for months, whispered something different. "This isn't right. This isn't love. This is cruelty dressed up as practicality." I didn't argue with them. Over the next 3 days, as they grew more insistent, more irritated with my hesitation, I just nodded quietly. I watched Jeremy carry my clothes down to the basement in garbage bags. I watched Amanda rearrange my furniture to suit her taste. I watched them take my room, my space, my dignity, and tell themselves they were doing me a favor. They made me sleep in the unheated basement while they took my master bedroom, saying I was getting too old to need all that space anyway. The first night in that basement, I sat on that terrible couch and cried until I couldn't breathe. The cold seeped through my sweater and into my bones. The ceiling was so low I felt like I was in a coffin. Upstairs, I could hear them laughing, the sound of water running in my bathroom, the creak of my bed as they settled in. I was invisible. I was disposable. I was the woman who'd given them life and shelter, reduced to a burden they'd tucked away in the dark. If you've ever felt like this, like you've given everything and been tossed aside for your trouble, I see you. Leave a comment. Tell me your story. Because what happened next, I did for all of us who've been made to feel like we don't deserve the space we occupy. The second night, lying on that fold-out couch with a blanket that wasn't warm enough, I had a thought that changed everything. I didn't actually know if Jeremy's name was on the house deed. Robert and I had bought it together, but after he died, the title went through probate. I'd signed documents, but I'd been so grief-stricken at the time that I couldn't remember the details. The thought grew teeth. What if I'd been living in fear inside my own house when legally, they had no right to be there at all? The next morning, while they were out at brunch, celebrating their anniversary, because apparently exile mother to the basement really puts you in a celebratory mood, I dug through my filing cabinet. My hands shook as I pulled out the folder labeled Property Documents. There it was. The deed. Updated after Robert's death. Sole owner, Helen Patricia Morrison. Not Helen and Jeremy. Not a trust with Jeremy as co-owner. Just my name. Only my name. I sat on the basement floor holding that document and felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't just my home emotionally or historically. This was legally, indisputably, exclusively mine. They had no claim. They had no rights. They had only what I gave them, and I'd been giving them everything while they gave me nothing but contempt. I thought about calling Jeremy, about showing him the deed, about having a conversation. But then I remembered Amanda's face when she called the basement perfect for me. I remembered Jeremy telling me I was taking up too much space. I remembered every small cruelty, every dismissive comment, every moment they'd made me feel worthless in my own home. No. We were past conversations. I pulled out my phone and searched for real estate attorneys in Portland. My finger hovered over the first result. Catherine Brennan, Family Law and Property Rights. The reviews mentioned her as fierce and no-nonsense. She sounded perfect. I booked a consultation for that afternoon. Catherine's office was in a renovated Victorian downtown. She was maybe 50, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that didn't waste time on small talk. I showed her the deed and told her everything: the slow encroachment, the takeover of my bedroom, the basement, the complete lack of respect. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing harder with each detail. "Helen," she said when I finished, "I need you to understand something. This is your property. Period. They are guests at your discretion. If you want them gone, we can make that happen immediately." "How immediately?" "Today if you want. We file for illegal occupancy, you change the locks, and you call the police if they refuse to leave. They have no tenancy rights because they haven't paid rent and there's no lease agreement. Legally, you could have them removed in hours." Hours. I could reclaim my life in hours. But Catherine kept talking. "However, I'm guessing you want them to feel what you felt. The shock. The helplessness. The sudden realization that they're not as secure as they thought." I looked at her and realized she understood me completely. "What do you suggest?" I asked. She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd helped many people reclaim their power from those who'd stolen it. "Change the locks while they're out. Don't tell them. Let them come home to a closed door. Put their belongings on the porch. Be home when they arrive so they can see you watching from your window, your master bedroom window. Let them feel what it's like to suddenly have no place to go." Is that legal? Completely. They're not tenants. They're unwanted guests. You have every right to revoke your invitation to your home. That night, I didn't sleep in the basement. I went to a hotel. And while I was gone, a locksmith Catherine recommended changed every lock on my house. Sunday morning. That's when I decided to do it. They'd told me they were going to brunch at 11, some trendy place in the Pearl District, to celebrate their anniversary. 14 years of marriage, Amanda had mentioned, like I was supposed to be impressed that they'd managed to stay together while treating everyone around them like garbage. I waited until I heard my car start. Yes, my car. They'd been using it for months because Jeremy's truck had transmission issues he never quite got around to fixing. I watched from the basement window as they backed out of the driveway, Amanda checking her lipstick in the mirror, both of them laughing about something. The moment they turned the corner, I moved. I'd already packed their things the night before, while they were asleep upstairs in my bed. Every piece of clothing, every toiletry, every laptop and phone charger and half-empty coffee cup. I'd worked in silence, filling garbage bags and boxes, my hands steady with purpose. It had taken me 3 hours, and when I was done, I'd felt more alive than I had in months. Now I dragged everything up from where I'd hidden it in the garage. The locksmith arrived at 11:15. A woman named Sarah who took one look at my face and asked no questions. She worked efficiently, replacing the front door lock, the back door, the garage door. Each new key felt like freedom in my palm. "You're doing the right thing," she said as she packed up her tools. She didn't know my story, but somehow she knew anyway. Women always know. I paid her in cash and tipped her an extra $50. Then I started moving their belongings to the front porch. Box after box, bag after bag. Amanda's expensive skin care products. Jeremy's collection of vintage band t-shirts. The stupid throw pillows they'd bought for my couch without asking. Their wedding photo in the silver frame. All of it, piled on the porch like the garbage it represented. I saved one item for last. The framed photo of Jeremy as a little boy that usually sat on my mantel. I'd kept it there for 35 years, through his childhood, his teenage rebellion, his wedding, his divorce, his return home. In it, he was 7 years old, missing his front teeth, grinning at the camera with pure, uncomplicated joy. I looked at that photo for a long time. I tried to find that child in the man who'd sent me to the basement. I couldn't. I put it face down on top of a box of Amanda's shoes. Then I went upstairs to my bedroom, and I reclaimed it. I stripped the bed and put on fresh sheets. I opened the windows to air out Amanda's cloying perfume. I moved all my clothes back into the closet, hanging them carefully, giving myself permission to take up space again. I lit Robert's favorite candle, the pine-scented one I'd been saving, and I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. For the first time in months, I could breathe. They came home at 1:30. I heard the car pull up, heard the doors slam, heard Amanda's voice first, sharp with confusion. "What the hell?" I stayed in my bedroom, watching from the window as they approached the porch and saw their belongings. Jeremy tried his key in the lock. Once, twice, 3 times, like maybe the 4th attempt would magically work. "Mom," he called, knocking on the door. "Mom, what's going on? The key isn't working." I didn't answer. Not yet. I wanted them to sit in that confusion, that first taste of powerlessness. "Helen." Amanda was yelling now. "Open this door right now. This isn't funny." Still, I waited. I watched Jeremy pull out his phone, watched him call me. Downstairs, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. 6 times in 3 minutes. Each unanswered ring was its own small revenge. Finally, I walked downstairs and opened the door. Just wide enough for them to see my face. "Mom, what the hell?" Jeremy's face was red, whether from anger or the cold, I couldn't tell. "Why did you pile our stuff outside? Why doesn't my key work?" "It doesn't work because it's not your house," I said. My voice was calmer than I'd expected. Strong. Clear. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. Only my name. I never agreed to be a permanent resident of my own basement. I never agreed to give you my bedroom forever. I invited you to stay temporarily, and that temporary period is over. You can't just kick us out." Amanda shrieked. "We live here." "No, you don't. You've been guests who overstayed their welcome. I consulted with a lawyer. You have no tenancy rights because you've never paid rent and there's no lease agreement. You're not tenants. You're trespassers that I'm choosing not to press charges against, yet." Jeremy's face did something complicated. Shock, anger, but underneath it, something else. Shame, maybe. Or the first dawning realization that he'd gone too far. "Mom, please," he said, and his voice cracked. "Please, can we just talk about this? We made a mistake. I know we did. But you can't just put us on the street." "You put me in a basement," I said. "You took my bedroom and told me I was too old to need comfort. You made me feel worthless in my own home. So no, Jeremy, we can't just talk about this. We're past talking." "Where are we supposed to go?" Amanda demanded. "We don't have anywhere." "That sounds like a you problem," I interrupted. God, it felt good to interrupt her. "I'm not your mother. And even if I were, Mothers don't owe their children infinite tolerance for cruelty. You're both adults. Figure it out. I stepped back and started to close the door. Wait, Jeremy said. He wasn't yelling anymore. He just looked broken. Can I at least ask why now? Why today? I paused. Looked at him. Really looked at him. Because you were celebrating your anniversary at brunch, I said quietly. You were celebrating, while I was sleeping in a basement. And I realized that I was done celebrating your happiness at the expense of my own. I closed the door. Locked it. All 3 locks, one after another, the sound of each bolt sliding home like a declaration of independence. They stood on the porch for another 20 minutes, calling my phone, knocking, Amanda occasionally shouting threats about lawyers. But Catherine had been right. They had no legal ground to stand on. Eventually, they loaded their belongings into my car, which I'd let them take one last time because I wasn't cruel, and they drove away. I watched them go from my master bedroom window. And then I sat on my bed in my room in my house, and I cried. Not sad tears. Relief tears. Rage tears. Freedom tears. If you've ever had to choose yourself after a lifetime of choosing others, you know these tears. They burn and heal at the same time. Share this story if it resonated with you. Check the description box for more stories about women reclaiming their power. The first night alone in my reclaimed house was the quietest night I'd had in 2 years. No footsteps above my head. No muffled conversations through the ceiling. No feeling like I was holding my breath in my own space. I made myself dinner, just scrambled eggs and toast, and ate it at my kitchen table without anyone sighing about needing the space or making passive-aggressive comments about what I should be cooking instead. I slept in my bed. My actual bed, in my actual bedroom, with my actual blankets, and when I woke up at 3 in the morning, it was to use the bathroom that was 10 steps away instead of a flight of stairs up from a basement. I had expected to feel guilty. I'd been raised to feel guilty for every boundary I set, every need I expressed, every moment I chose myself instead of martyring myself for someone else's comfort. But the guilt never came. What came instead was grief. Not for Jeremy and Amanda. They'd made their choices and earned their consequences. But for myself. For the woman I'd been for 63 years, the woman who'd believed that her worth was measured by how much of herself she gave away, how small she could make herself, how much discomfort she could endure without complaint. I grieved for every time I'd said yes, when I meant no. Every time I'd apologized for taking up space. Every time I'd convinced myself that love meant accepting whatever scraps of respect people chose to give me. That woman had survived in the basement. She died the moment I changed those locks. And I mourned her even as I celebrated my freedom. Jeremy called 37 times over the next 3 days. I didn't answer. Amanda sent text messages that started as threats, evolved into bargaining, and finally landed on insults. I blocked her number. My phone became peaceful. On the 4th day, I got a different call. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Morrison? This is David Chun from. I stopped him. I asked for no names like Chun in my story. He apologized and told me he was from a community mediation service. Jeremy had reached out requesting a family session. Would I be willing to meet with them, with a neutral third party present, to discuss the situation? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to refuse out of pure spite. But another part of me, the part that remembered 7-year-old Jeremy with his gap-toothed smile, wanted to at least hear if he was capable of a real apology. 1 session, I said. 1. And if it's more excuses or manipulation, I'm done. We met at the mediation center the following Tuesday. Jeremy and Amanda sat on one side of a conference table. I sat on the other. The mediator, a woman named Patricia, explained the ground rules. No interrupting. No personal attacks. Focus on resolution. Amanda went first. This is insane, she started, and Patricia immediately held up a hand. Let's try that again with I statements and focusing on feelings rather than judgments. Amanda's jaw clenched, but she tried again. I feel like this situation has been blown out of proportion. We were just trying to find a practical solution for everyone. By putting me in a basement, I said flatly. You agreed to it. I didn't argue, I corrected. There's a difference. I didn't argue because you're my son's wife and I was trying to keep the peace. But the absence of a fight doesn't mean consent. It means I was too tired and too conditioned to know I deserved better. Jeremy spoke then, and his voice was different than I'd heard in months. Smaller. Ashamed. Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. I don't know what I was thinking. We got so caught up in our own problems that I stopped seeing you as a person. You became just this obstacle, this thing taking up space we wanted. And that's unforgivable. I waited. Apologies are easy. Change is hard. But. I prompted. But nothing, he said. There is no but. What we did was wrong. What I did was wrong. You're my mother. You raised me alone after Dad died. You gave me everything. And I repaid you by treating you like you didn't matter. His eyes were wet. Real tears, not manipulative ones. I've seen both enough to know the difference. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued. I don't expect you to let us back into your house ever. I just need you to know that I see what I did. I see it clearly now. And I'm horrified by it. By myself. Amanda was silent, her arms crossed, clearly not in agreement but smart enough to know this wasn't her moment. Where are you staying? I asked. Extended stay hotel in Beaverton. It's not great, but it's temporary. I got a job. Actually, I got 2 jobs. I'm working construction during the day and stocking shelves at night. Amanda's interviewing for positions. We're going to get our own place. For real this time. Good, I said. That's what you should have been doing from the beginning. I know. We sat in silence for a moment. Patricia looked between us, assessing. Is there a path forward here? She asked. Not necessarily back to how things were, but toward some kind of relationship. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. He'd disappointed me profoundly, hurt me in ways I was still processing. But he was still my son. Still the boy I'd raised. And unlike Amanda, who sat there radiating resentment, Jeremy seemed genuinely broken by what he'd done. Maybe, I said carefully. Eventually. But not now. Right now, I need space. I need time in my house by myself, remembering what it feels like to matter. I need to rebuild the parts of me that got destroyed in that basement. And you need to prove, through actions not words, that you understand boundaries and respect. How long? He asked. I don't know. Months, at least. Maybe longer. But if you want any chance at rebuilding this, you'll respect that timeline. You won't push. You won't show up at my house uninvited. You won't guilt-trip me or send Amanda to negotiate. You'll let me heal on my terms. He nodded. I can do that. We'll see, I said. The mediation session ended shortly after. Amanda barely said goodbye. Jeremy walked me to my car and stood there awkwardly, like he wanted to hug me but knew better. Thank you for coming, he said. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't, I admitted. But I needed to see if you were actually sorry or just sorry you got consequences. And the jury's still out. I drove home, to my home, my space, my sanctuary, and felt lighter than I had in years. The house was still mine. My bedroom was still mine. My life was still mine. And if Jeremy proved himself worthy of being back in it someday, fine. And if not, that was fine too. Because for the first time in my 63 years, I understood something fundamental. I didn't need anyone's permission to take up space. I didn't need to earn comfort or justify my existence or shrink myself to make others feel bigger. I was enough, exactly as I was, taking up exactly as much room as I needed. 3 years have passed since that day. Jeremy and I talk now, cautiously, carefully. He never lived in my house again, but he visits sometimes, and he treats me with respect. Real respect, not the performance of it. Amanda and I are polite when necessary and avoidant when possible. That works for both of us. I turned my basement into a craft room. I painted the walls sunshine yellow and installed proper heating and good lighting. It's actually pleasant now, but I rarely go down there. I prefer being upstairs in the light, in the spaces I choose. Sometimes I think about the woman I was before that February day, the woman who would have lived in that basement forever rather than make waves. I don't recognize her anymore. She was a ghost, haunting her own life, terrified of being too much or asking for too much or needing too much. I'm not that woman now. I'm someone who changed her locks and chose herself and survived the guilt that came after. I'm someone who learned that love without respect isn't love at all, it's just exploitation wrapped in family obligation. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you. Thank you for witnessing this. For understanding that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to disappear, refuse to shrink, refuse to accept basement-level treatment in our own lives. To anyone out there feeling invisible in their own home, in their own family, in their own life, you deserve better. You deserve warmth and comfort and basic human dignity. You deserve to take up space without apology. And if the people around you can't see that, then maybe it's time to change the locks. Check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about women who refused to disappear, who chose themselves, who learned that self-respect isn't selfish, it's survival. Your life is yours. Your space is yours. Don't give it away to people who treat it like a basement.